After catching the woman he loved in the arms of another man, just weeks before their wedding, Seo's world shattered. Alone, guarded, and determined to rebuild himself, he never imagined his heart would be stirred again until he met her. A beautiful black waitress whose kindness and strength caught him off guard. But will this unexpected love story end in happiness or heartbreak? Stay with me to find out. Grab your seat, relax, and if you love great stories like this, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell. Let's dive in. Miriam had always believed that talent and hard work would be enough. Her degree in architecture and interior design hung in a simple frame on the wall of her small bedroom. It was a quiet reminder of years spent staying up late, perfecting sketches, and chasing stubborn dreams. But after graduation, reality began to chip away at her confidence. The economy at home was weak, and the industry was slow to welcome new voices. She sent out her portfolio again and again. She sat through interviews where people smiled politely but gave her no real chance. Some doubted her ability simply because she was a woman in a field where women were rare. Others made advances she refused to entertain. She wanted her work to speak for her, not her looks. Her father had been her greatest supporter. He had once been a promising architect himself, but a car accident left him unable to work on construction sites. With limited mobility, he had to take small design jobs that paid very little. Eventually, he began helping her mother run a small fish business to keep the family afloat. It was from him that Miriam learned her craft. He taught her how to read plans, how to think about space, and how to see beauty in structure. More than anything, he shaped her into a woman determined to reach the heights he could not because of life's misfortunes. But life after school was harsh. Every time she came close to a breakthrough, something would go wrong. Promises fell through. Offers came with conditions she could never accept. Even old contacts from her father's past could not open the doors she needed. She had been one of the best students in her class, but it didn't seem to matter. And when her landlord slid another rent notice under her door, she knew she couldn't stay in the city much longer. She began packing her belongings into boxes. Her architectural models, tiny worlds she had built with care, were the hardest to wrap away. It was in the middle of this quiet defeat that her phone rang. The call was from her mother's elder sister, Auntie Cynthia, who lived in Seoul, South Korea. She was no ordinary business owner. She ran one of the best-known African restaurants in Itaewon, a place famous for drawing diplomats, celebrities, and homesick travelers. "Come to Korea," her aunt said. "Work with me in the restaurant for a while. You'll save money faster, support your family, and maybe even find a way to reach your dream here. I can talk to my husband about helping you look for work too. This doesn't have to be forever, but it can give you a fresh start." Miriam hesitated. Working as a waitress was not the future she had imagined. But her aunt kept her promise. She arranged everything, paid for her travel, and made sure Miriam would be safe. Miriam reminded herself of something her father always told her. Sometimes the longest road still takes you to your destination, as long as you keep walking. Seoul was overwhelming at first. Tall glass buildings stood beside narrow traditional streets. The city was alive day and night. Her aunt's restaurant was its own small world. Warm lights glowed against polished wood. The smell of rich African dishes blended with popular Korean meals. Waiters moved quickly, carrying trays as laughter and conversation filled the air. Miriam quickly learned the pace of the job, balancing plates, memorizing regulars' orders, and helping her aunt keep things running smoothly. But the designer in her never rested. She noticed where the lighting was too dim, where the space felt crowded, and she suggested small changes to improve the flow. Her aunt listened. Sometimes she only raised an eyebrow. Sometimes she smiled proudly. Customers noticed too, and soon a few began asking if Miriam could help with their own spaces. With the help of her uncle and cousins, she learned how things were done in Korea, took small projects, and delivered well, which added to her work portfolio. Her first payments felt like small victories. She supported her family back home and even managed to save. Her father called often, reminding her not to lose focus, to find a way to leave a mark in Korea, one that would reach home and make him proud. That thought kept her going. One busy afternoon at the restaurant, a neatly dressed man stepped through the doors. His name was Mr. Bong. He walked straight to the reception counter and asked to reserve a table for 3. His tone carried a sense of urgency, the kind that made Miriam pay close attention. He explained that his boss was hosting an important private dinner with influential African business guests. The meeting was not just casual. It was the final stage of securing a big contract. Mr. Bong's job as his boss's assistant was to ensure everything was perfect. He had chosen their restaurant because of its reputation for hosting business dinners, and because he knew the guests loved African food. Miriam listened carefully, asking the right questions. She suggested dishes that would not only taste good, but leave a strong impression. Mr. Bong nodded approvingly at her choices, clearly relieved to find someone who understood the weight of the occasion. Before leaving, he asked if he could give her name to his boss, so she could personally handle the table. He likes to arrive early for meetings, Mr. Bong explained. It gives him time to settle and prepare before the clients arrive. Miriam agreed, promising to make everything smooth. Mr. Bong left looking more confident than when he arrived. The next evening, just as the sun dipped behind the Seoul skyline, the restaurant's front reception received a visitor. He was tall, neatly dressed in a dark suit, and carried himself with quiet authority. "I'm here for a dinner meeting," he said. "Could I speak with Miriam?" The receptionist called her over. Miriam was dressed in her uniform, the standard for senior waitstaff and floor managers when her aunt or cousins were not around. The man introduced himself as Seo Jun. Miriam confirmed his reservation and led him to the private dining area, a softly lit space designed for discreet business conversations. Seo glanced around and gave a small smile. "This is perfect," he said. He ordered a glass of fresh juice, explaining that he wouldn't eat until the clients arrived. He wanted the extra hour to go over some documents. When Miriam returned with his drink, she noticed him flipping through a thick file, looking increasingly tense. Then, in his rush to sort through the pages, several sheets slipped from his hands and scattered onto the floor. Miriam quickly knelt to help him pick them up. As she gathered the papers, her eyes caught the fine lines and symbols of a building plan. Without thinking, she commented softly, "This looks like a production factory layout and maybe a section for retail sales too?" Seo paused and stared at her, surprised. "You know building plans," she explained, almost shyly. "I studied architecture and interior design. My father taught me most of what I know. He was in the field for years." Seo hesitated, then admitted, "There's a drafting error here. A major one. If I show this to the clients, it will make me look careless and unserious." He explained how the meeting was with African investors who wanted to set up their production headquarters in Korea. This was his first time working with African clients, and the deal was worth millions. Miriam understood immediately. "If you do not mind, I can help you fix it," she offered. Seo was grateful for her help and followed her to a small office upstairs, where she kept her laptop for sketches and online classes. She listened as he described the correct structural layout, then adjusted the design in his file, reprinted the corrected plans, and even redesigned the cover page to look more polished. She also printed copies for each guest, so they could follow along during his presentation. They finished just in time. The guests arrived a few minutes late. The dinner went smoothly from the start. The investors were pleasantly surprised to see the revised plans address the exact structural concerns they had raised in their previous meeting. Between the clear presentation and the warm hospitality, helped by Miriam's choice of African-inspired appetizers, the evening was a success. By the end, the investors shook Seo's hand with genuine satisfaction. The deal was sealed. For Seo, the night was unforgettable not only for the business victory, but because a stranger had stepped into a critical moment and made everything better. As he prepared to leave, he thanked Miriam warmly. "How can I repay you?" he asked. She smiled and shook her head. "You did most of the work yourself. I just helped you fix a small problem." He didn't quite agree, but he let it go. Instead, he asked if he could visit her again, maybe near her closing time, just to talk. Miriam nodded. Seo left the restaurant that night with a rare grin, stepping into his waiting car, already looking forward to their next meeting. The next evening, true to his word, Seo returned. Miriam hadn't expected him to actually show up again, but there he was, and this time carrying a neatly wrapped gift. She was just finishing her shift when she noticed him at a corner table. Once she was free, she walked over. Seo's face lit up immediately. "I'm glad you could sit for a while," he said, sliding the box toward her. When she unwrapped it, she found a leather-bound sketchbook and a set of fine drawing pens. "I'm not the kind of man who lets angels pass through his life without showing gratitude," Seo explained softly. "I saw this," Seo Jun said softly, "and thought of you. You have hands that create beauty, and I believe every creator deserves a place to keep their dreams." Miriam blinked, touched by the thoughtfulness. It wasn't expensive or flashy, but it felt personal. She sat with him for a few minutes, and soon they were talking like old friends. Seo Jun told her that the clients from the other day had returned, and the deal was now official. The paperwork signed, the payments made. He seemed excited, but he kept steering the conversation toward her. "Why is someone as talented as you working here?" he asked gently. "I can tell you're worth far more than this place can give you." His tone wasn't judgment, but genuine curiosity. Seeing his concern, Miriam opened up. She told him about her background and her studies in architecture and interior design, her struggles to get a job after graduation, the offers that came with impossible conditions, and how her aunt had brought her to Seoul to help at the restaurant while she and her husband helped her get a job here, and been here was good for her the main time. She explained the language barrier, the occasional small gigs she got in interior projects, and her determination to keep improving. Seo listened without interrupting, his gaze steady. When she finished, he smiled. "You're stronger than you think, Miriam. And you'll get there." He shared a little about himself too, though not everything. He told her his father ran a construction company, that he had studied architecture at Seoul National University, and later earned a master's in urban design in the US. He spoke of trying to prove himself in his father's eyes, but he left out the fact that his family was one of the most influential in the city. He liked how Miriam treated him not for his name, but for who he was. Before they parted that night, he asked for her number. In his heart, he was already thinking of ways to help her, though he didn't say it yet. But for now, he simply wanted to know her better. Over the next weeks, Seo became a regular. Miriam thought he was just being friendly, maybe visiting because they'd become friends. He began exploring African delicacies with her. Some he loved instantly. Others made him rush for water and laugh at himself later. "This one's fighting me from the inside," he'd joke, patting his stomach. She, in turn, tried some of his country's dishes, learning to appreciate their flavors. He even helped her with her Korean classes, encouraging her to speak without fear of mistakes. She often joked that his mini language lessons were harder than her real classes, but she appreciated them. These sessions brought them closer. Seo Jun found himself drawn to her humility, patience, and the way she stood up for others. He had seen her settle tense moments in the restaurant with grace. Each day, it became harder for him to hide his feelings. And whenever he noticed other men, especially some bold customers, trying to get close to her, a quiet fear grew inside him. A month after they met, Seo finally acted. He could have found her a job at his own company, but he didn't want gossip to diminish her achievements. Instead, he reached out to his friend Suji, a graduate school classmate who ran a mid-sized construction firm. Suji valued skill over connections. When Seo showed him Miriam's portfolio, a blend of architectural accuracy and interior elegance, Suji was immediately interested and offered her a role managing a major project with excellent pay. Miriam was thrilled. She started work the next week, but didn't leave the restaurant entirely. Evenings still found her there, serving with her usual grace. She kept her evening shifts at the restaurant, telling herself it was part loyalty to her aunt, part comfort, and that the restaurant has been her first safe space in Korea, and she wasn't ready to let it go. By day she designed, by night she served. Her language skills improved steadily, partly thanks to Seo's lighthearted tutoring. She was grateful for his help, though sometimes she wondered why he was so invested in her. As months passed, their bond deepened. The language lessons, the shared meals, the quiet encouragements, all stitched together into something warm and unspoken. Seo admired her discipline and her refusal to give up, but every time he saw another man try to win her attention, it made him restless. One evening, he decided he couldn't keep it in anymore. He invited her out, saying it was somewhere different from where they'd met. The location was an open, softly lit park by the river, a picnic laid out under strings of warm lights. They ate, laughed, and for a moment it felt like time slowed. "Miriam," he began, "I've tried to pretend I only want to be your friend. But that's not the truth. You've become someone I think about every day. I admire your strength, your kindness, the way you see the world. I want you to be mine." She froze for a moment, caught between surprise and the quiet feelings she had buried. I need to think about it," she said finally. "The matters of the heart. I don't rush them. I need time to trust what I'm feeling." He nodded, though his eyes searched hers. "I can wait. But know this, I don't plan on giving up." He drove her home in silence. As she stepped out, his last words echoed in her mind. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Over the next week, she avoided him. Part of it was uncertainty, but part of it was a growing suspicion. Seo was open about many things, but he avoided talking about his family. The thought lingered. Was he hiding something, or hiding her? Miriam turned to the one person she trusted most in the city, her auntie. Over late-night tea in the quiet kitchen of the restaurant, she poured out everything she had kept bottled up, her feelings for Seo, her doubts, and her fears. She admitted she liked him more than she wanted to, but she didn't want to get hurt. They were from different races, different countries, and she had seen too many such relationships crumble under pressure. Her auntie listened patiently, her eyes soft but steady. She told Miriam she understood her fears, but urged her not to let them build walls before the foundation of the relationship had even been tested. She reminded her that she had watched Seo closely, the way he lingered at the restaurant just to see her, how his eyes lit up when Miriam laughed, the patience with which he tried African dishes he barely understood. Then she let slip something Miriam didn't expect. "He came here twice this week looking for you," her auntie said gently. "He said you've been avoiding him at the office too. I had to give him excuses, but the truth is, you've been shutting him out completely." Miriam's chest tightened. She tried to explain that she was simply being professional, keeping things formal at work, but she knew her auntie was right. She had been avoiding him like the plague. Her auntie sighed and reached for her hand. "You should have told him your fears, Miriam. Sometimes people hide parts of themselves, not because they're deceiving you, but because they're not ready to share. Not everyone enjoys talking about their family, especially if their relationships there are complicated. You've been open with him, yes, but maybe his way of opening up takes longer. And you'll never know unless you give him the chance to explain." She reminded Miriam that love required more than just attraction. It needed patience, trust, and the willingness to see beyond the fears whispering in her head. Focus on him, not the what-ifs. If he really loves you, he'll prove it. And don't let the fear of different cultures or backgrounds kill something that could be beautiful. I've seen interracial relationships here bloom into happy marriages. Yours could be one of them. The words sank deep. Miriam felt the weight of her aunt's sincerity and realized she had handled things poorly. She had let uncertainty drive her instead of clarity. That night, she decided she needed to make things right with Seo Jun. But when she tried, it wasn't as simple as she hoped. He didn't come to the restaurant anymore. No warm smile waiting at her section. No unexpected flowers or handwritten cards at the start of her day. Even her calls went unanswered. Miriam didn't dare ask Suji, her current boss and Seo's friend, because she feared it would sound too personal, maybe even unprofessional. She told herself he might just need space, but the hollow feeling in her chest grew with every day he stayed away. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, she sent him a message one early morning. She confessed her fears, her doubts, and how much she missed him. She told him she had been wrong to ghost him without explanation. When Seo read the message, something in him shifted. He understood her now. The walls she had built weren't rejection, they were defense. And maybe it was time he tore down his own walls too. That same afternoon, as Miriam was leaving a construction site, tired and dusty from a long day, a sleek car pulled up. Seo stepped out, his smile warm and familiar. She had missed that smile more than she realized. "How did you know I'd be here?" she asked, trying not to sound too eager. He grinned. "My stupid friend finally figured out that I wasn't coming to see him all those times at his company. He told me you'd be here and said I should stop acting like a lovesick fool and just tell you everything." She smiled at his words, and they drove off together, eventually stopping at a quiet spot for snacks. Sitting together in the fading afternoon light, Miriam started to apologize for ghosting him, but Seo took her hands and stopped her. "You don't need to be sorry. I should have been more open with you," he said gently. "So here it is." Then he began to tell her about his life, the family he had kept shielded from her. He came from one of South Korea's oldest business dynasties, a conglomerate with deep influence in construction and urban development. He was the only son, with two younger sisters, one a brilliant lawyer, the other a famous actress. Every woman he had dated in the past had been drawn more to the prestige of his family than to him. His parents had always tried to arrange alliances, pushing him toward daughters of powerful friends who could strengthen the family's network. He told her of the last arrangement he had agreed to, when he had been younger and eager to live up to his father's expectations. Weeks before the wedding, he discovered his fiancée's betrayal, an affair she had kept hidden. The experience had left scars, making him wary of opening his life to anyone. And yet with Miriam, it was different. She saw him, not the family name. He asked her to give him a chance, promising he would never hurt her. Miriam agreed to give him that chance. Their relationship blossomed into something tender and exhilarating. They made the most of every moment. Stolen breakfasts before work, late-night walks through the quiet streets, and afternoons exploring places neither had been. Miriam felt a joy she hadn't known in years, and Seo seemed lighter, as though finally living for himself. But happiness is rarely without trials. Unknown to Seo, his parents had not changed their old ways. A powerful government official, an old friend of his father, had a daughter he wanted Seo to marry. The alliance promised more than personal gain. It would secure lucrative government contracts for the family's business. When Seo's parents presented the idea, he refused outright, reminding them of the disaster their last arrangement had caused. He told them how hollow it felt to live only to please them, how for the first time in his life he had chosen someone who completed him. His sisters quietly celebrated his defiance, recalling the broken man he had been after his ex-fiancee's betrayal. But his father was deeply wounded. His son had never openly gone against him before. Determined to find the woman who had changed their son, his parents had Seo followed. Their loyal driver, after months of observation, revealed that Seo frequently visited a particular restaurant, often in the company of the same woman. It wasn't long before his mother appeared at the restaurant to confront Miriam. She offered money, prestige, anything to make her walk away. Miriam, insulted, told her that love could not be bought and that she was content with her life. But the rejection only hardened Seo's father's resolve. He used his influence to have her fired from her job at the construction firm, her boss yielding to promises of future contracts. The blow was devastating. Her career was just beginning to take shape, and now it was gone. As she was trying to come to terms with this, Seo's father dealt a final strike. With cold precision, he fabricated a story, telling her Seo had been engaged all along and was finally set to marry the official's daughter. To make it believable, he produced photographs, moments taken when the woman had unexpectedly bumped into Seo at an occasion, hugging him in greeting, captured in angles that suggested far more than reality. The images tore at Miriam's heart, the weight of it crushing the trust they had built. She walked away, convinced she had been a fool to believe their love could survive the worlds that sought to pull them apart. Seo Jun had been out of town for several days on an urgent work assignment when everything came crashing down for Miriam. He was handling a high-stakes project. The trip had been intense, but nothing compared to the knot of unease twisting in his chest. Miriam had been distant, her calls brief, her messages fewer, and then silence. The moment his flight landed, he switched on his phone. Still nothing from her. Anxiety began to claw at him. He wasn't the type to panic easily, but something told him this wasn't just space. Something was wrong. Within an hour, he had the answer. Miriam had been fired from her job. Not just fired. Dismissed by his own friend over a business deal tied to his father. Seo knew his father well enough to recognize the hand behind this. Unyielding, strategic, and, when it came to personal matters, utterly merciless. The moment he landed, he didn't go home. He drove straight to the little restaurant where he knew he would find her. But Miriam wasn't there. Instead, her auntie, with a heavy expression, told him to leave her be for now. Miriam was going through a crisis. She handed Seo a folded letter, saying it was the only way Miriam could find the strength to speak to him. In it, Miriam's handwriting trembled across the page as she explained how hurt she felt, how crushed she was by the humiliation from his parents, how losing her job in such a cruel way had broken her spirit. She wrote that she wanted him to focus on what his parents wanted for him, that maybe this was the best path. Seo's chest tightened as he read her words. For days after, he couldn't stay away. He showed up at the restaurant, sometimes sitting outside for hours, other times just leaving small notes hoping she talks to him. Miriam slowly began to rebuild her life, and one evening, as she was clearing up to close the restaurant, she turned to find Seo standing there. His voice was quiet but aching. "Miriam, life has been unbearable without you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what my parents did, for what my friend did. I hate that you had to face this alone." She stood frozen, torn between wanting to run into his arms and wanting to protect herself from more pain. "This isn't about you being sorry, Seo," she said softly. "I've seen how your parents feel about me. I don't want to be caught in the middle of fights that will only get worse. I think this should be the last time we see each other." Her voice cracked, and she quickly turned away before her tears could fall. Seo reached for her hand, but she stepped back. They both knew this wasn't because the love had faded. It was because the world seemed set against them. After she left that night, Seo's world collapsed. For days, he locked himself in his room, refusing food, refusing to work. His strong, stubborn nature turned into a silent protest against his parents. He wouldn't speak to them, wouldn't see them, wouldn't even leave the house. His father, who had never seen him so broken, began to fear the worst. When weeks passed and Seo only grew thinner, his parents finally bent. For the first time, they admitted they had been wrong. Desperation drove them to Miriam's restaurant, where they humbled themselves before her and her auntie. Her auntie didn't make it easy. "Do you remember," she said sharply to Seo's mother, "the day you came here and tried to buy her away from your son? You insulted her. You disrespected my family. And now you're here because you see what she means to him. This isn't just about saving your son's life. This is about undoing the pain you caused. It was not an easy conversation, but Miriam's heart ached knowing Seo was suffering. She finally agreed, not for the parents, but for the man she loved and for the sisters who had always stood by her. When she walked into Seo's room, he looked pale, thinner, and exhausted. But the moment his eyes found hers, they lit up with the faintest spark. She went to him, sat beside him, and took his hand. "You're not allowed to give up on me like this," she whispered. "Not when I never stopped loving you." In the days that followed, Miriam stayed by his side, feeding him, coaxing him out for short walks, making him laugh again. Slowly, Seo began to return to himself, but this time, he refused to let her out of his sight. His parents, watching the transformation, finally understood that this wasn't a passing romance. This was the love of their son's life, and they had to respect that to avoid losing their only son. And so, they stopped fighting it. The walls that had once stood so high between them came down. Seo's sisters, overjoyed, welcomed Miriam warmly into the family, telling her how proud they were of her strength. Months later, standing together under a canopy of lights, Seo held Miriam's hands and said, "No matter where we go, what the world throws at us, you are my choice. Every day, for the rest of my life." And for once, there was no one to object. Only smiles, blessings, and the quiet certainty that they had fought for this love, and it had been worth every moment and everything falling into place. It was a love story that didn't just survive the storm. It bloomed because of it.